Hope is the most dangerous drug a person drowning in debt can consume. Just when he thought he was escaping his 66,000-pound nightmare, life violently smashed his teeth in. To survive, he didn't just budget, he committed social suicide. This is the raw anatomy of a financial bloodbath. They never warn you that hope is the most dangerous drug a person drowning in debt can consume. You always assume the worst part of owing over 66,000 pounds is the suffocating math, but it is not. The absolute worst part is that fleeting, intoxicating second when you finally believe you are winning, only for life to step out of the shadows and brutally smash your teeth in with a baseball bat. You think you hold the reins. You think your willpower is enough to bend reality. But the universe possesses a sickeningly dark sense of humor. At Money Glow Up 02 warmly welcomes you to a story they refuse to teach in polished financial seminars, a raw autopsy of a financial bloodbath. If you have ever felt the crushing weight of the world on your shoulders, hit that subscribe button right now to support the channel and give us the driving force to keep bringing you these unfiltered, unapologetic truths. Let me take you inside the mind of Jay at the very beginning of June. If you have ever been buried alive in debt, you know exactly what the first of the month feels like. The paycheck hits the bank account, and for a microscopic moment, a surge of adrenaline and arrogant defiance floods your veins. Jay was riding that exact psychological high. In his mind, he had already declared a ruthless war. He made the silent, desperate vows we all make. He was going to survive on nothing but stale bread and cheap instant ramen, pulling his belt so incredibly tight that his ribs bruised, all just to hurl every spare cent at that monstrous mountain of debt. He had crafted a financial spreadsheet so perfect it looked like a work of art. Every single number was meticulously calculated, forecasting a smooth, beautiful downward curve of his balances. It was a flawless illusion of control. But reality is not a spreadsheet. Reality is the undisputed father of all brutal awakenings. The hammer fell on a perfectly ordinary, quiet Wednesday. There were no ominous storm clouds, no warning lights, no dramatic foreshadowing. Jay was just driving, navigating the chaotic grind of daily survival, when his car suddenly shuddered and violently died right in the middle of a busy road. It just sat there, a lifeless hunk of metal blocking traffic. Try to vividly imagine the sheer, paralyzing terror of that exact moment. Your heart drops straight into your stomach. This car was not a luxury. It was his only lifeline, his only tool to get to work, to earn the meager wages required to fight off a financial apocalypse. And now, the legs of his operation were utterly shattered. The crisis violently escalated from there, and the resulting invoice was enough to make a grown man want to vomit. Let us look at the bleeding numbers without looking away. Jay was forced to pull out his wallet and instantly hemorrhage 328 pounds to the RAC mechanics just to show up and drag the rotting corpse of his vehicle off the asphalt. But the bleeding did not stop. The starter motor was entirely fried, the battery was completely drained of life, and the exhaust pipe was dangling by a rusty thread requiring immediate welding. By the time the dust settled, over 700 pounds had simply evaporated into thin air. 700 pounds. When you are starving yourself to save pennies, an unexpected bill of that magnitude is not just a setback. It is a nuclear bomb dropped squarely on your fragile glass house. The psychological devastation is indescribable. You feel a venomous cocktail of blinding rage, wanting to smash the steering wheel into 1,000 pieces, paired with an endless, suffocating helplessness. You fight so incredibly hard, clawing your way up through the dark, icy water just to take one desperate gasp of air, and the universe just casually places a boot on your head and shoves you back down to the freezing bottom. The dark, terrifying thought of just letting go, of letting the debt completely swallow him whole, absolutely flashed through Jay's mind. Why keep fighting when you are inherently cursed? It is a primal, defensive reaction from a brain pushed to the absolute edge of its sanity. But the true measure of survival is never about avoiding the abyss. It is about what you do when you are staring directly into it. Staring directly into that dark abyss of sudden, unexpected expenses, Jay had to make a choice that would either utterly destroy him or permanently define the rest of his life. When you are forced to hand over 700 pounds you objectively do not have, the immediate aftermath is not a loud, dramatic breakdown. It is a suffocating, ringing silence. It is the quiet, sickening realization that your carefully constructed safety net was nothing more than a fragile illusion. Because his bank account was already bled dry from his aggressive debt payoff strategy, Jay had no choice but to put the mechanic's bill on a high-interest credit card, effectively feeding the very monster he was starving himself to kill. The 66,000-pound mountain had just grown taller, casting a longer, colder shadow over his entire future. For 3 days, a deep, paralyzing depression anchored him to his mattress during every single hour he wasn't clocked in at work. He watched the world pass by through the dirty window of his apartment, mindlessly scrolling through social media feeds where peers were posting photos from sun-drenched European vacations and clinking icy cocktails on expensive rooftop bars. The isolation of extreme debt is a solitary confinement of the mind. You feel entirely alienated from the human experience, trapped behind a thick pane of soundproof glass where you can see everyone else breathing, laughing, and living, but you are slowly suffocating in a vacuum. He realized in those dark hours that the flawless spreadsheet he had worshipped was merely a coping mechanism, a psychological shield to pretend he was safe from the random cruelty of the world. The phantom weight of that plastic credit card burned in his wallet, a constant reminder of his failure. But sitting in that quiet, dim room, nursing a cup of black coffee he could barely afford, a fragile but hardened resolve began to take root in his chest. He stopped feeling sorry for himself and recognized that hoping for a smooth, linear journey was a fool's errand. The universe was not going to stop throwing punches, which meant he had to stop expecting a fair fight. He had to become someone who could take a brutal hit to the jaw, spit out the blood, and keep walking forward into the storm. This was the exact moment the delusion of an easy fix finally died, and the grim reality of a prolonged, ugly war was truly accepted. Accepting that relentless chaos was the absolute baseline of his existence, the real, grueling work of survival had to take on an entirely new, vicious form. This was no longer about skipping a morning latte or buying generic brand pasta to save a few pennies. This was about the brutal, bleeding anatomy of genuine sacrifice. Jay looked around his apartment and realized he was living in a dusty graveyard of past consumer mistakes. Every modern gaming console, every designer jacket hanging in the closet, every piece of neglected electronics was just imprisoned capital keeping him chained to his creditors. He became ruthlessly unsentimental. The things he once deeply loved and tied his identity to were photographed, listed online, and aggressively sold to strangers for fractions of their original cost. But the financial bleeding required more than just a digital yard sale to stop. Jay took on a second job, completely surrendering his evenings and weekends to the exhausting, mindless rhythm of physical warehouse labor. The physical toll was immediate and unforgiving on a body used to an office chair. His hands grew heavily calloused, his lower back throbbed with a dull, constant ache that no painkiller could touch, and his sleep became fragmented and shallow. Yet, the physical pain was absolutely nothing compared to the social death he had to endure. When you are fighting a 66,000-pound war, the word no becomes your entire vocabulary. He had to look his closest friends in the eye and decline wedding invitations because he could not afford the travel or the hotel room. He missed milestone birthday dinners, casual pub nights, and summer barbecues. The polite excuses eventually ran out, replaced by a shameful, awkward honesty that made people look at him with deep pity. And pity is a bitterly toxic pill to swallow. Eventually, people just stop inviting you out. You become a living ghost in your own social circle. The sheer, crushing loneliness of this phase is something financial gurus conveniently gloss over in their upbeat podcasts. They tell you to hustle and grind, but they do not tell you how deeply it hurts to sit alone in a dark, empty apartment on a Friday night, icing your swollen knees, wondering if the people you love have already forgotten you exist. But this agonizing isolation was the crucible he needed. In this quiet, lonely darkness, stripped of all distractions and social validations, Jay was forging a titanium discipline that no unexpected car repair or financial emergency could ever break again. Through that agonizing isolation and bone-deep exhaustion, a strange and quiet transformation began to unfold in the neglected shadows of Jay's life. Progress in the realm of massive, towering debt is incredibly deceptive, operating as a slow, agonizing bleed rather than a glorious, sweeping, cinematic victory. For months, Jay threw every single dollar of his warehouse wages and sold off possessions into the blazing furnace of his credit card balances. And for a very long time, the needle barely seemed to move. When you owe over 60,000 pounds, manually paying off 1,000 feels like trying to empty the vast ocean with a rusty teaspoon. The exorbitant interest charges alone were a daily parasite, devouring a massive chunk of his hard-earned payments before they even grazed the principal balance. But then, right around the harsh transition from late autumn into the bitter, freezing depths of winter, a mathematical tipping point finally occurred. The avalanche method he had obsessively and blindly trusted finally gained undeniable traction. One of the smaller, high-interest credit cards, a toxic revolving door of consumer debt that had actively haunted him for 5 years, hit a zero balance. The moment Jay logged into the banking portal, staring at the glowing screen to see that flat, beautiful zero, his heart physically skipped a beat in his chest. He did not celebrate with an expensive dinner out or a celebratory drink with colleagues. He celebrated by sitting in complete, heavy silence, letting the profound, monumental weight of that single victory wash over his exhausted body. It was a purely chemical high, far more intoxicating and permanent than the false hope he had experienced months prior. The helpless victimhood that had plagued his mindset for years completely evaporated, instantly replaced by a dangerous, predatory momentum. He was no longer the desperate prey running from the crushing weight of his aggressive creditors. He was the hunter. Every time he logged in to transfer a payment, it felt like landing a devastating, calculated blow on a sworn enemy. The numbers on the screen were finally retreating, bleeding out under his relentless pressure. The brutal sacrifices, the lost weekends, the alienated friends, the physical pain, it all crystallized into a sharpened weapon. He had actively weaponized his own suffering, and for the very first time in his adult life, the end of the tunnel was not just a theoretical concept discussed in self-help books. It was a faint, glowing reality, and he was sprinting toward it with relentless, unstoppable fury. As the numbers on the screen slowly surrendered to his relentless assault, the man staring back in the mirror was fundamentally no longer the same person who had blindly starting this journey. The metamorphosis was absolute, leaving behind a heavily scarred but infinitely wiser version of Jay. The 66,000 pounds of debt had once been a suffocating curse, a towering monument to his previous life of reckless consumerism and desperate attempts to buy a social status he could not actually afford. Now, looking back, it was the most brutal, effective teacher he could have ever asked for.
His entire philosophical relationship with money had been violently torn down to the studs and rebuilt from the ground up. He no longer viewed a paycheck as a superficial means to acquire shiny things. He saw money purely as stored energy, a vital tool to purchase his own freedom, security, and time on this earth. He clearly saw that the relentless marketing machines, the suffocating societal pressures, and the glossy illusions of wealth broadcasted on social media were all part of a highly sophisticated trap. It was a system specifically designed to keep people exactly where he used to be, chained to a cubicle, terrified of the first of the month, and one broken starter motor away from total ruin. Jay was not entirely debt-free yet, as the mountain still required climbing, but the paralyzing fear of the unknown was completely eradicated. The sickening anxiety that used to jolt him awake at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat had been replaced by a quiet, unshakable confidence. He knew he could survive on absolutely nothing, which meant the corporate world and the fragile economy could no longer threaten him. This is the unapologetic, raw truth of the financial bloodbath that no one wants to talk about. It is not about downloading elegant budgeting apps or finding clever life hacks. It is about surviving the blistering fire long enough to become entirely fireproof. If Jay's grueling journey resonates with the silent, desperate battles you are currently fighting in the dark, do not let this moment pass you by. Hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who desperately needs to hear the unfiltered reality of getting out of the hole. And drop a comment below about the hardest sacrifice you have had to make to buy back your own freedom. We are building an unbreakable community of survivors here at Money Glow Up 02, and your specific story might just be the exact lifeline someone else needs to wake up and keep fighting today. Jay's harrowing journey out of a 66,000-pound debt is not a glamorous tale of quick fixes, but a brutal testament to the power of raw, unapologetic endurance. Confronted by sudden financial disasters that shattered his fragile safety net, he was forced into a psychological abyss where panic and extreme isolation thrived. Yet, in that dark, solitary confinement of massive debt, he found his crucible. He stopped relying on flawless spreadsheets and false hope, accepting instead that financial survival requires grueling, bleeding sacrifice. By working a physically demanding second job, selling off the heavy anchors of his past consumerism, and enduring the agonizing social death of saying no to everything, Jay forged a titanium discipline. Progress was agonizingly slow, a painful bleed rather than a swift victory. But his sheer persistence eventually tipped the mathematical scales. Hitting that first zero balance sparked a profound metamorphosis. Jay transformed from a desperate victim running from creditors into a relentless hunter actively reclaiming his life. His relationship with money was fundamentally rebuilt from the ground up, no longer seeing it as a ticket to superficial status, but as vital, stored energy used to buy freedom, time, and absolute security. Ultimately, Jay's story proves that escaping financial ruin requires surviving the blistering fire until you become entirely fireproof, stripping away societal illusions to build an unshakable, self-reliant foundation. True financial liberation cannot be achieved through clever hacks or superficial budgeting. It is forged entirely through extreme discipline, the endurance of temporary suffering, and the absolute willingness to sacrifice your current comfort for your future freedom. Debt is not just a math problem. It is a psychological war. The ultimate victory lies in tearing down your attachment to consumer-driven social status and recognizing that money is not a metric of your worth, but a weapon used to defend your independence. Start by radically auditing your environment and your ego. Look around your home and identify the imprisoned capital, items you bought for status or fleeting dopamine hits, and aggressively sell them to fund your financial rescue. Embrace the immense power of the word no. Accept that you will temporarily disappoint friends and family by missing outings and social events, understanding that this short-term social sacrifice is the mandatory price of long-term peace. Shift your mindset from defense to offense. Stop viewing your debt as an oppressive monster and start treating every single dollar you earn as a soldier to hunt down your balances. Target your highest interest debt with relentless fury and learn to find deep, quiet satisfaction in the slow, methodical process of taking your life back one payment at a time. What is one specific thing you have given up or are willing to give up right now to reach your financial goals? Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments section below so we can all learn and draw inspiration from each other's journeys.
If you found value in this story, please hit that subscribe button to support the channel. It gives us the motivation to keep creating more impactful, hard-hitting content for you.